Hello everybody, 권아나입니다. 오늘은 여러분의 수면을 도와드리기 위하여 ASMR을 준비했습니다. 열려라 참깨의 기원을 말해주는 그 동화, 알리바바와 40인의 도적 동화를 읽도록 하겠습니다. 남의 것을 탐하면 벌을 받는다. 주인공 포함해서 라는 교훈을 주는 이야기입니다. 주인공도 도둑질한 것을 가져갔으니 작물 취득죄에 해당합니다. 착하게 삽시다. 제 낭독이 끝나기 전에 여러분은 잠들 것입니다. 안 들면 열려라 참깨 라면. ASMR. Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. In a town in Persia, there lived two brothers, one named Qasim, the other Alibaba. Qasim was married to a rich wife and lived in plenty, while Alibaba had to maintain his wife and children by cutting wood in a neighboring forest and selling it in the town. One day, when Alibaba was in the forest, he saw a troop of men on horseback coming toward him in a cloud of dust. He was afraid they were robbers and climbed into a tree for safety. When they came up to him and dismounted, he counted 40 of them. They unbridled their horses and tied them to trees. The finest man among them, whom Alibaba took to be their captain, went a little way among some bushes and said, "Open sesame," so plainly that Alibaba heard him. A door opened in the rocks, and having made the troop go in, he followed them, and the door shut again of itself. They stayed some time inside, and Alibaba, fearing they might come out and catch him, was forced to sit patiently in the tree. At last, the door opened again, and the 40 thieves came out. As the captain went in last, he came out first and made them all pass by him. He then closed the door, saying, "Shut sesame." Every man bridled his horse and mounted. The captain put himself at their head, and they returned as they came. Then Alibaba climbed down and went to the door concealed among the bushes and said, "Open sesame." It flew open. Ali Baba, who expected a dull, dismal place, was greatly surprised to find it large and well lightened, hollowed by the hand of man in the form of a vault which received the light from an opening in the ceiling. He saw rich bales of merchandise, silk brocades all piled together, and gold and silver in heaps, and money in leather purses. He went in, and the door shut behind him. He did not look at the silver, but brought out as many bags of gold as he thought his asses, which were browsing outside, could carry. He loaded them with the bags and hid it all with faggots, using the words, "Shut sesame." He closed the door and went home. Then he drove his asses into the yard, shut the gates, carried the money bags to his wife, and emptied them out before her. He bade her to keep the secret, and he would go and bury the gold. "Let me first measure it," said his wife. "I will go and borrow a measure of someone while you dig the hole." So she ran to the wife of Qasim and borrowed a measure. Knowing Ali Baba's poverty, the sister was curious to find out what sort of grain his wife wished to measure, and artfully put some suet at the bottom of the measure. Ali Baba's wife went home and set the measure on the heap of gold, and filled it and emptied it often, to her great content. She then carried it back to her sister, without noticing that a piece of gold was sticking to it, which Qasim's wife noticed directly as soon as her back was turned. She grew very curious and said to Qasim when he came home, "Qasim, your brother is richer than you. He does not count his money. He measures it." He begged her to explain this riddle, which she did by showing him the piece of money and telling him where she found it. Then Kasim grew so envious that he could not sleep, and went to his brother in the morning before sunrise. Ali Baba, he said, showing him the gold piece. You pretend to be poor, and yet you measure gold. By this, Ali Baba perceived that through his wife's folly, Kasim and his wife knew their secret. So he confessed all and offered Kasim a share. That I expect, said Kasim. But I must know where to find the treasure. Otherwise, I will discover all, and you will lose all. Ali Baba, more out of kindness than fear, told him of the cave, and the very words to use. Kasim left Ali Baba, meaning to be beforehand with him and get the treasure for himself. He rose early next morning and set out with 10 mules loaded with great chests. He soon found the place and the door in the rock. He said, "Open sesame." And the door opened and shut behind him. He could have feasted his eyes all day on the treasures, but he now hastened to gather together as much of it as possible. But when he was ready to go, he could not remember what to say for thinking of his great riches. Instead of sesame, he said, "Open barley." And the door remained fast. He named several different sorts of grain, all but the right one, and the door still stuck fast. He was so frightened at the danger he was in that he had as much forgotten the word as if he had never heard it. About noon, the robbers returned to their cave and saw Kasim's mules roving about with great chests on their backs. This gave them the alarm. They drew their sabres and went to the door, which opened on their captain's saying, "Open sesame." Kasim, who had heard the trampling of their horses' feet, resolved to sell his life dearly. So when the door opened, he leaped out and threw the captain down. In vain, however, for the robbers with their sabres soon killed him. On entering the cave, they saw all the bags laid ready and could not imagine how anyone had got in without knowing their secret. They cut Kasim's body into 4 quarters and nailed them up inside the cave in order to frighten anyone who should venture in, and went away in search of more treasure. As night drew on, Kasim's wife grew very uneasy and ran to her brother-in-law and told him where her husband had gone. Ali Baba did his best to comfort her and set out to the forest in search of Kasim. The first thing he saw on entering the cave was his dead brother. Full of horror, he put the body on one of his asses and bags of gold on the other 2, and covering all with some faggots, returned home. He drove the 2 asses laden with gold into his own yard and led the other to Kasim's house. The door was opened by the slave Morgiana, whom he knew to be both brave and cunning. Unloading the ass, he said to her, "This is the body of your master, who has been murdered, but whom we must bury as though he had died in his bed. I will speak with you again, but now tell your mistress I am come." The wife of Kasim, on learning the fate of her husband, broke out into cries and tears. But Ali Baba offered to take her to live with him and his wife if she would promise to keep his counsel and leave everything to Morgiana. Whereupon she agreed and dried her eyes. Morgiana, meanwhile, sought a doctor and asked him for some lozenges. "My poor master," she said, "can neither eat nor speak, and no one knows what his distemper is." She carried home the lozenges and returned next day weeping, and asked for an essence only given to those just about to die. To be continued. I hope you are sleeping now. 쿨쿨.